between what I see and what you guys see, which gives me time to go faster than the speed of light, literally, and change what's going to happen somewhere in the world. Okay. Everything looks pretty good. Probably, yeah, I think we're doing okay volume-wise. Probably doing okay. What are we missing? Let's see who's coming in. See who's coming to hang out. Stream's rock and rolling. Stream stats apparently are excellente, which is always a very, very good thing. Brian Leach, how you doing, sir? Welcome, welcome. God, it gets hot in here so quick. Cobalt, what's up? Just instant. Gets instantly very hot. Hot here. Brian just got the notification. Very good. I'm glad the notifications are going out. For a while, they were not going out, and that was very annoying. Don, how you doing? Don, I'm glad we got your email thing squared away. Christine. Steve the Iceberg. Ricky Berg, how are you, sir? Hi, Tibbity. Story time. Excellent. Cobalt got to the Metallica show. Awesome, dude. That must have been super duper fun. All right, people are getting the notification. I have not changed anything. So it just, apparently you get the notification now. That's just the way things go. It's technology. It's always kind of crazy. My shirt's a little itchy. I will not be, stripping down to go topless for you, but the shirt is a tiny bit itchy. Hopefully it won't distract from my performance. How are we doing? We got Facebook, we got YouTube, we got Twitch, all kinds of good stuff. John Williams. No, I'm not going to get naked on this show. That's my OnlyFans. And that costs a whole lot more, my friend. And a whole lot more. We're going to go live in 6 minutes. So if you are watching this in the recorded version of this and you don't want to hear me babble, just fast forward to 0 and we will be in the middle of the story. Hey, Jen. Jen Hathorn's in the house. Jen Hathorn had a tough week, you guys. So give her some love in the chat room. Martin, how are you? Good to see you, my man. Matt Moretti. Look at people just pouring in now. People are pouring in. Richard, you are going to get some great storytelling, my man. That is exactly what you're going to get. 5 minutes, 36 seconds of story time. Let's see. Now we got a couple people in here. Let's go over this. Tonight is a live read of Slay episode 72, Termination, the culmination of the action of this story. Episode 73 will follow. That is the epilogue that kind of puts a nice bookend on season 2 and all. It's a double bookend. It's a double-ended bookend. One puts a bookend on season 2, and then we start the bookend for season 3. They're all very much tied together. So after this, there's one episode left. Following the reading, we'll be doing a live recording of Deep Cuts, our bonus content for the feed. Tonight's topic, the difference between sci-fi and fantasy in the marketplace and for me as a creator. So if you've got questions on that, get them ready, but we'll ask for them. A's probably got a bunch already to go. Should be very interesting. Hey, Sean, evening. And speaking of questions, you guys are going to want to get your questions into info@emptyset for the Slay Q&A episode or episodes if we have enough questions. We definitely, actually, it will be episodes. We'll be having 2 because we're still going to do deep cuts during that. And so make sure you get your questions in because that is coming up on August 21st and August 29th. We're going to have the live episodes for deep cuts. Nell's in the house. Brittany, how are you? Good to see everybody, man. Donnie Bliss. No, Donnie Bliss, you can't fast forward now. That's not how time works, Donnie Bliss. It's not how time works. And another thing is I'm much less active on Twitter these days. I'm not a big fan of what's going on over at Twitter, but I am more active on Threads. So threads.net/Scott Sigler. If you're not following me there, follow me there. If you're not on Threads, it feels a lot like Twitter of yesteryear. There's still a bunch of crap that goes on there, but not nearly as much. And I'm posting there a bunch. And I'm interacting there a bunch. And at times I'm starting to share more political stuff. So keep that in mind. If you want your creator to not be talking about politics, don't follow me on Threads. Jen says, Scott gives good thread. Thank you very much, darling. Thank you very much. Go back to opening. Let's get rid of these info and boom, boom, boom. There we go. Pam Weber in the house. My old friend Pam. Farmer Ted, can't wait till Sunday. Blow Ted away. Will do. I don't know if that means you're listening now or you're going to go listen on Sunday when it drops into the feed. But we will get that figured out. Yeah, that's what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? Man, I tell you guys what, my attention span is absolutely fried. The last 2 weeks, the news cycle has just completely overwhelmed me, and in some regards has me feeling a whole bunch more optimistic about the possible direction of America. And on the other hand, it's the sense of dread and foreboding is still kind of there, and very, very different political opinions from my immediate family, which has significantly added to my stress level, my anxiety level, my general consternation about things and stuff. So my attention span is fried. We're going to talk about where I'm at in word count right after the story read before we go into deep cuts. So I'll give you an update on what's going on in the crypt, and you'll can see how many words Slay is right now. It's a lot of words in Slay. So, Jerry Cobb, you are. Thank you very much, sir. It's very kind of you. Very, very kind of you. Jerry, just toss us a little tip. We got to track that shit. Like, we're going to go buy us a bottle of like a six pack of Bud Light or some stuff like that and celebrate back with all y'all. All right. Just over 1 minute to story time. It is going to get super toasty in this room while I'm reading. So if you see me sweating, that's not because I haven't prepared a good story for you. It's not about that whatsoever. It's the fact that it's friggin' hot. So we open up the bedroom's right there. If we open that up, we can blow cool air in here, and it's quite nice. But as soon as I have to shut that to get the right sound of everything, and then as soon as it's like being a little microwave, being in a little microwave. Bruce Bach in the house. How you doing, sir? Okay. All right, I got to start buttoning up the shop. We are getting ready to go. Let's get back to here. Whoops, back to opening. Get rid of these timers. Get rid of these timers. I'm going to close up the doors, and we're just going to go right into it, y'all. Okay, let's see how we do. Getting ready for the final action episode of Scott Sigler Slices Slay Season 2. I'm a little nervous. I'm like a tiny bit nervous. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. We are going to start the recording process. We're going to double check that we are recording, and we are recording. Everything is great. Let's get into it. Previously on Slay. Deep underground in Teddy Two Fingers' cell block lair, Haimana's giant scorpion delivered a massive dose of poison to Kellius Droman. Kellius is down for the count. Is he dying? Fueled by rage, Billy unleashed his internal power and torched Haimana's killer beetles. Under the light of 10,000 fireflies, Billy rises up for the final battle with Haimana, but first he must defeat the same scorpion that downed his teacher. With the help of her fellow captives that she may or may not be controlling, Delilah defeated Teddy Two Fingers. He lies on the floor of his room, bound in guitar strings, bleeding heavily from a tiger swipe to the arm. The dreamgaunts crawled down from the captives' heads and were crawling toward Teddy. Meanwhile, Lincoln searches the cell block complex, hunting for Teddy, who is the only one who can tell Lincoln how to get Lincoln's son Samuel off the purgatory-like hellscape known as the shelf. Will he reach Teddy before it's too late? Find out next on Slay, episode 72. Lincoln ran past another dead Thuengol, this one lying in a small puddle of blood, killed by a blade to the base of the skull. Up ahead, blood on the floor, running down the walls, dripping slowly from the ceiling, all undoubtedly drawn from the emaciated, tactical gear-clad corpse on the floor outside an open door. A regular door, not a cell door. Through it came the sound of kids crying, of kids whimpering. Pistol in one hand, hatchet in the other, Lincoln rushed through the door. He stopped cold. Kids, 8 of them. Children and young teens. Some stood there, staring. Some lay on a shag rug in the fetal position, crying and shaking. One teenage girl, naked, sitting on the edge of a bed, looking in confusion at her blood-streaked hands. A teenage boy, his jeans wet at the crotch, sitting cross-legged, slowly, absently, sliding a face-down guitar across the floor, a little this way, a little that way. And in the middle of the room, next to a strange, rough, waist-high pillar of stone that had punched through the shag rug, stood Delilah Droman, dressed like a smaller version of Haimana. She had Haimana's cornrows, too, although Delilah's were blonde. Delilah stared down at Teddy Two Fingers. His white shirt torn, his sleeve soaked in blood, leather pants scuffed and filthy. Teddy lay on his back, legs kicking slightly like a dog in a dream. A meat pile of oozing, twitching dreamgaunts covered his face, neck, and shoulders, their long, disgusting, many-knuckled fingers jerking in spasmodic, orgasmic motions. They pushed against each other like sharks in a feeding frenzy. One gaunt had a finger buried in Teddy's left ear, another gaunt's finger in his right. 2 different gaunts each had a finger sunk deep into Teddy's eyes, another 2 in each of his nostrils. Yet another had its tail plunged down Teddy's mouth and into his throat. 7 gaunts, each invading an orifice. Lincoln had observed much horror in his days. He had seen things that would drive a sane man crazy, that would make a brave woman run. He had witnessed atrocities and blasphemies. He'd watched absolute evil triumph over ultimate good. He had seen his own child trapped on a plane of hell. The scene before him now, though, it disturbed him. It shook his soul. It shook him because he knew the orgy of gaunts was the doing of a 13-year-old girl. "Delilah," Lincoln said softly. "Delilah, it's me." She turned slowly and faced him. Eyes darkened with heavy makeup. Lipstick smeared. Mascara trails down her cheeks. "You came for me. I knew you would, Lincoln. I knew you would. You're a little late, though." She gestured to Teddy, whose legs moved with weak little kicks. "My friends and I took care of business." Teddy. He was still alive. Teddy knew how to get Sam off the shelf. Lincoln rushed past Delilah, started pulling dreamgaunts off the man and smashing them against the rug so hard they burst. Billy rose up, his fire that was not fire lifting him into the air. He didn't know how. It simply happened. Everything looked different. The expansive room now painted in reds and oranges and yellows. The scorpion's tail drove toward him. Billy reached up, caught the blue wrecking ball stinger coming in, and he held it. The scorpion braced, tried to drive the stinger home, but Billy was stronger. And Billy was pissed off. The anger and hate within him took form, flowed down his arms, through his hands, and into the huge stinger. Chiton reddened, sagged, melted, while simultaneously bursting into flames that coursed down the thick, segmented tail like a burning wick. The beast's heavy body glowed from within for an instant, then jets of ruby-red fire flared from between its segments, blazing 10-foot tongues lashing outward. The scorpion burst apart in an explosion of boiling fluid and sizzling meat. Under the lightning bug glow, tarantula Haimana strode forward, bleeding, raging, hating, with an intensity and flavor Billy could feel and taste, could drink in like the horizon-covering radiance of a sunset wildfire. Her hate, so beautiful. "I spent years on that creation," she said, frustration tearing her words to rags. "Droman himself could not have bested it, yet you destroyed it. How? Who are you? He called you Walter, but he also called you William." She spread her arms, her red kimono sleeves torn in a dozen places by Morgan's wicked wind. "How did you do that? Who are you?" Haimana's hands gleamed with iridescence. From the edges of the room, surviving beetles crawled forward, 6 of them, all burned in multiple spots, long pincers snapping hungrily. A pair of giant centipedes took flight, rising up from the room's dark corners, their hundreds of little wings burring and buzzing. Their pincers streaming poison like milk from a cow's teat. Too many. They were going to bite him, cut him. They were going to poison him. Billy was about to die, just like Kellius Droman was dying below, his convulsing body wrapped in the arms of Morgan Stone. The centipedes streaked closer. Power. Use it or lose it. Billy clasped his hands together at his chest as if praying, and desperately focused on the space between his palms. He drove his body's filament to that spot, focused it, concentrated it, let it become the plasma of a new star. Poison fangs open wide. Billy raised his clasped hands above his head and envisioned that new star detonating in a supernova eruption. Expanding heat caught the centipedes in midair, set them instantly ablaze, turning them into cindering ash that splashed against Billy's white armor. Billy tried to pull his hands apart, but he couldn't. The supernova between his palms continued to burn hotter and hotter. Below him, beetles burst into moving bonfires. They whipped and whirled. They rolled and kicked, but there was no quarter for them, no way to extinguish the flames. "Billy, turn it off!" Morgan, calling up to him, one hand around Droman's shoulders, the other extended toward Billy, concentrated wind streaming from it, pushing against Billy's fire that wasn't fire, forming a shield against the conflagration. A shield pushed closer and closer to her and Droman. Billy tried to pull his hands apart. Billy again tried to pull his hands apart. He could not. They were fixed together as if encased in iron. He heard Haimana's scream. Flame and billowing smoke engulfed the bug witch and her spider body, made her a living bonfire. "Stop! Please, stop!" she screamed, her words already wet and gurgling. "I submit! I submit! Please stop it! Please stop, please!" Billy's power was cooking her alive. He twisted his hands, tried to unclasp them. He couldn't budge them, couldn't stop the hellish blowtorch heat emanating from between his palms. Haimana screamed and screamed, arms waving, body thrashing, spider legs kicking every which way. The tarantula woman ran madly, an insect scrambling for survival, but there was no escape, there was nowhere to run. "Billy, you're killing us!" Morgan, screaming to be heard over the roaring flames and her windshield as Billy's blaze came closer and closer to her and Droman, closer and closer. "The mesh buzz is amplifying your power. Focus! Turn your power off!" Not just amplifying it. The mesh buzz's unpredictability accelerated his spell far beyond his control. Morgan's extended hand came closer to her head, as if a great weight pressed down against it and her strength was failing. Fire coursed around her and Droman in mad comet trails, kissed off the stone floor in a shrinking circle around them. Billy's power was going to burn her alive, turn her and Droman into ash. Billy focused. He stared at his clasped hands. This was his power. He had to master it. He envisioned the filament nova between his palms shrinking, weakening. His hands trembled. He concentrated, ignoring Haimana's desperate shrieks. In his mind's eye, the filament force began to shrink. Slowly at first, like pushing in the sides of a rubber ball, and then the whole thing condensed to a tiny point. That point blinked out. Billy tumbled from the air, dropped like a stone. He hit the floor elbow first, cried out in pain. The red and yellow and orange was gone. Everything looked normal again, cast in the faint firefly glow. Haimana's screams became whimpers. Billy leapt to his feet, drew his shotgun, but there was no need. Perhaps 20 feet away, Haimana's spider body lay on its back, each curled, twitching leg a segmented pole of fire. The witch had separated from that body, crawled a short distance before curling into a fetal position. Engulfed in flame, she twitched a few times, then fell motionless, converted from a living person to nothing more than fuel for the blaze. Even if Billy could have figured out how to draw the fire away from her, he wasn't sure he wanted to. Haimana deserved to burn. Billy hurried to Morgan, who held Droman tight while he convulsed and spasmed, clawed weakly at his throat. He couldn't breathe. His eyes were wide, full of panic and dread. On the ground next to him was an empty vial streaked with faint traces of pink fluid lining the glass. Long strands of Morgan's heavy white hair clung to Droman's black fatigues, partially covered his emerald amulet. Was his chest? Yes. The man's entire chest was swollen, pushing out against his clothes. "Help him," Billy said. "You know healing and stuff. Help him." In answer, Morgan gently gripped Droman's wrist, held it tight, stopped him from clawing at himself. "It's too late, Billy. Too late. Too much poison." "Then let's get him out of here. Get him up to a hospital or something." Morgan looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "He won't make it," she said. "Kellius will be gone in seconds. Help me comfort him in his final moments." It was almost over. Billy could see that now. There was nothing he could do, nothing Morgan could do, nothing anyone could do. With the dying flames of giant beetles, a giant spider, and a truly evil woman roaring around him, Billy knelt next to Droman. He held Droman's other wrist and waited for the end. Teddy, can you hear me? Lincoln gave the man's shoulders a shake. Teddy, wake up. He shook harder. Teddy, wake up. Teddy's eyes stared out, pupils dilated to black dimes, his mouth slack and open, his chest rising and falling in the slow, steady rhythm of deep sleep. Non-responsive. Catatonic. Lincoln turned, looked up at Delilah. What did you do to him? Delilah's head tilted to the right, just a bit. I gave him a taste of his own medicine. Maybe a whole meal of it. 13 years old. Barely a teenager. Barely a teenager. She sounded so cold, so callous. Yet her voice carried a tone of satisfaction. Deservedly so, maybe, but Lincoln needed Teddy. Delilah, he had 7 gaunts on his face. Were you controlling them? The naked teenage girl in the bed, the one staring at her bloody hands, raised her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The foreman controlled the gaunts. Her voice quavered, broke. Had she been the one that cut Teddy's arm? The foreman controlled us. She made me do it. She made me. The boy with the piss-soaked pants lifted his guitar by its neck, banged the body against the floor. I wanted to do it, he said. I liked it. They deserved it. A teenage boy with dark skin nodded intently. They deserved it. He clapped his hands together, a round of insane applause. They had it coming. They had it coming. I will never eat hamburgers again. They had it coming. He lay down where he was, tucked his hands under his head, and went to sleep. These children needed help. Delilah, Lincoln said, tell me what you did to Teddy. Delilah walked to a rumpled blanket lying in a corner. She picked it up, draped it around the shoulders of the naked girl. I put Teddy to work. I put Teddy to work, Delilah said. The same work he made us do. You might say he's putting in overtime. Our nightmares and his non-stop. I'm sorry, Lincoln, but I can't bring him back. Is my dad here? Did he come with you? She was wrong. She had to be wrong. Lincoln had been hunting Teddy for years. Teddy held the key to rescuing Sam. It couldn't end like this. Yes, your father came with, Lincoln said. So did Morgan and Walt. We got separated. I have to go find them, but first, bring Teddy back, right now. He's the only one who can tell me how to get my son off the shelf. Please, Delilah, wake him up. Lincoln heard the pleading tone in his voice, but he didn't care. If he had to beg to get his boy back, beg he would. Delilah looked down at Teddy. The smallest of smiles ticked up a corner of her lipstick-smeared mouth. I can't wake him up. She shrugged. If you'd got here sooner, maybe he could have told you something. He's working now, Lincoln. Got to make quota. No vacations for Teddy. He gets to work for the rest of his life. This girl had giggled while painting Lincoln's nails. She had delighted in buying him a new motorcycle. She'd laughed and teased Billy while they played video games. Her face, her body, Her face and her body were the same, yet those things seemed part of an artificial glaze covering an entirely different person. A darker person. A broken person. "Delilah," Lincoln said, fighting to keep his voice level, "I am not playing around. You bring him back right now, or you don't get to tell me what to do." Her face screwed into a dark-eyed mask. Teeth bared. Fists clenched. "You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. My father doesn't get to tell me what to do anymore. And you can be damn sure that Teddy Two Fingers doesn't get to tell me what to do anymore. No one tells me what to do anymore. I'm not a little girl that needs to be controlled, that needs to be hidden away. I am not someone's property." She pointed at him, She pointed at him, her long, sharp fingernail gleaming in the room's light. "Do you hear me, Lincoln? Do you hear me? You couldn't protect me when I needed it. You couldn't save me. I saved myself." She slapped her sternum, emphasizing each word. "I control me. I control me. I control..." She trailed off, blinked in confusion. Her chest lurched like something was ripping out of it. She heaved in a noisy, gasping breath. She fell back on the bed, spasming in a seizure. Lincoln ran to her, gently but quickly moved the blanket-covered girl aside. "Delilah, talk to me," he said, distantly aware he'd said those same words to Teddy only moments earlier. "What's happening? Can you hear me?" She thrashed on the bed. He put one arm across her chest, another on her hip, trying to keep her still. Her breaths ripped in and out in a sawtooth rush. That smell coming from her, meshwork. Powerful meshwork. Disintegrating meshwork. Someone had cast a spell on Delilah Droman, and now that spell was collapsing. From her body came a crackling sound, a splitting sound, an ominous groan of matter transforming, stretching, expanding. Her face contorted in pain. As Lincoln watched, that face changed. Subtly, almost indefinably, but he could see it happening. The sounds slowed. So, too, did her trembling and convulsing. She opened her eyes. Delilah Droman looked older. "Lincoln? What just happened?" He shook his head. "I don't know." But he feared he did know, because he'd seen something similar not that long ago. Delilah sat up. Lincoln helped her. She stood on wobbly legs. She was taller, a good 3 inches taller. "I feel different," she said. Her voice, it was slightly deeper. Seconds earlier, Delilah Droman had been a 13-year-old girl. Now, she was a woman, maybe 23 or 24, filling out the red kimono that had hung loose on her. "Blazing hells," Lincoln said. Delilah looked at her arms, down at her legs, at her body. Footsteps in the corridor. Lincoln grabbed Delilah, pulled her behind him as he drew his pistol. "We're coming in," Billy's voice. "Don't shoot, it's us." He limped through the door, shotgun in hand. Morgan close behind. Save for the white scale armor that covered his arms, his chest, and hung down to his upper thighs, Billy didn't have a stitch of clothing on him. He looked drained. The right side of Morgan's face was swollen from a powerful blow. The white-haired mage looked battered, broken in both body and soul. They both glanced at Teddy, quickly understood that he was no longer a threat. Morgan looked at each of the kids, but did not look at Delilah. "We saw Sophia," Billy said. "That metal wall around the elevator room retracted. She's going up to get people from the Bastion to help with the kids. These and the ones still in their cells. And Haimana's dead." The way he said those words told Lincoln that Billy had killed her. Lincoln, or Magda, would talk to him about that, help him cope with it. But not now. "Agnetha's dead too," Lincoln said. "So are all the Thuangals I saw." A heavy silence hung in the air. Billy looked at Delilah. "You too, huh?" "Me too what?" She hugged her shoulders, her pointed, painted fingernails catching on the red kimono. Her callous confidence had fled. What are you talking about? Morgan? What just happened to me? Where's Dad?" Morgan hesitated, then gripped Billy's shoulder. Walter, take these children to the elevator, please." Billy gave Delilah one last look. He smiled. "I'm glad you made it, Dee," he said. Then gently and efficiently addressed each of the kids, got them out of the room. Which left Morgan, Lincoln, Delilah, and the catatonic Teddy. The room was trashed. Dropped guitars, torn posters, broken table and toppled chairs, scattered sheets and blankets, and a literal treasure chest. Small, but visible. Was there anything inside? Delilah sat on the edge of the bed, dark eyes wide and scared. "Morgan, where is my dad?" There could only be one reason for Morgan's hesitancy. She couldn't avoid it any longer. Lincoln would have given Delilah the answer himself, but he hadn't seen Droman's end, which meant it wasn't his place to speak. "Delilah, I'm so sorry," Morgan said. "Your father is dead." Lincoln's heart sank for the girl. Everyone had failed her, Lincoln included. And now her father was gone. Sometimes life can be absolute shit. Delilah stayed quiet for a moment. The hands clutching her shoulders slid down, came to rest on the bed. She stood. She reached down, picked up something that had wrapped around one of the bed's legs. A black leather jacket. Teddy's jacket. Delilah gave it a shake, then pulled it on. It was too big, yet it suited her, seemed to jibe with the smeared lipstick and heavy eye makeup. The look on her face filled Lincoln with sadness. What had been a bright, happy, loving person was now hard as iron and twice as cold. "I'm not 13, Morgan," Delilah said. "Did you know?" Morgan hung her head. "Yes, I knew." Lincoln fought a sudden, powerful urge to punch Morgan in the mouth. Who could do such a thing to a child? Delilah's red lips pursed. She nodded, accepting the inevitable. "I see. And how old am I? 20? 21? 22, Morgan said. "It was your father's spell. When I learned about it, I tried to tell him it was wrong. I argued with him. He said he was doing it to protect you, so he could keep you in the mansion lest his enemies sought you out. You argued with him, but you didn't tell me." Delilah shook her head. "That makes you just as guilty as he was." She looked at Lincoln. "Did you know? Did Walt?" Lincoln shook his head. "I did not. Neither did Walt. Believe it or not, Billy's grandmother did basically the same thing to him. for the same reasons, to protect him. Delilah's darkened eyes squinted, evaluated. After a moment, she nodded. I believe you, she said. Thank you for coming for me, Lincoln. I will thank Walt myself. I'm sorry about Teddy. I didn't know he held the key to finding your son. Do you believe me? Delilah had become harder than a railroad spike. People like her, people like Lincoln, did not lie. Not about things like this. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I believe you. That mattered to her. Lincoln could see it in her reaction. I'm 22 years old, she said. I am my father's sole heir. That means I own the Droman Empire now. I'm the boss. Morgan, to pay for what you did to me, you will assist me in the transition of Dad's companies and assets. When that is over, you will be let go. Do you understand? Head still hung, Morgan nodded slowly. Delilah stepped to Lincoln. She took his hands, gently pulled him down, kissed his cheek. I'll be seeing you, she said. Look out for Walt for me, okay? Lincoln rose, squeezed her hands. I will. If you need me, Delilah, I will always be here. Always. For a moment, her eyes wavered. She seemed on the edge of tears. Then, she mastered the emotion, shut it down with the certainty of steel. I know you will. She gestured around the room. Teddy kept several magical treasures in here. She pointed to a guitar lying face down on the floor. That one, in particular, is extremely valuable. Perhaps you can put it to good use. Goodbye, Lincoln. Morgan, take me to my father's body. Head low, burdened with shame, Morgan Stone left the room. Delilah Droman followed her and did not look back. Lincoln stared after them for a moment, then at the guitar, then at Teddy. At catatonic Teddy, who held the secret to rescuing Lincoln's only child. Was his brain as fried as Delilah said? Sophia and Auntie Juanita would find out. They had the Bastion's resources at their disposal. If Teddy could be brought back, they would do it. And if he couldn't be brought back, then Lincoln would find another way. He would find a way to save his son. All right. Boop. There you go, team. Check, check, check. Sounds funny to me. I don't know what's going on. I'll have to check that out later. Oop, itchy. That's pretty much the end of the action. And then there's a bunch of plot threads that we will be cleaning up next week. In episode 73, I'll give you a teaser. Lincoln's got to go see Callista. And there's a bunch of other stuff that has to go down next week. So, baby girl, come on up whenever you're ready. Yeah, Richard, you do have 3 more seasons. That is correct. Big Nasty liked it. Bravo. Jennifer says, holy shirt balls. Pam Wowie. Kim Dam. Nicely done. Look at you guys. Give me all that sugar, all sweet and stuff. I appreciate it. I greatly appreciate it. I am thrilled that you enjoyed that. I am delighted you guys were here live for this finale. Super cool. Excuse me. Thanks, baby. It's a little, I'm not gonna lie, a little bit of an emotional, whoops, turns from me off. A little bit of an emotional ending to that for me. That was, some of that was a little hard to get through. But we're back in business now. Back in business again. Back in, oh, there we go. Let me make that a little bigger. Hey, everybody, look who's here.
Hi, guys.
Okay. So, we are still working out some things sound-wise. So what we're going to try and do is, can you come a little closer?
Sure.
Bring this like over there. And then remember, you've got to, let's try turning your headphones down a bit. So you're not, can you hear yourself?
I can hear myself. We'll try it again.
Yeah, okay. So, hold on. So what we're experimenting with today is we're coaching A to just flat out speak louder so I can turn down the volume on her mic because her microphone is picking up my microphone and it makes for a bit of extra work on the back end. So we're going to see if we can fix that up. And I'll get my mug right on top of this mic. And I will try and talk quieter.
Sure.
And maybe we can meet in the middle.
We can try it again.
So let's bring you down a smidgen. Talk to me, Goose.
I am talking to you and projecting towards the back of the room.
You're gonna make a mockery of this, aren't you?
No, I'm not. I mean, that's what you want me to do, but
Perfect.
Yeah, I will try this again.
Okay, can everybody hear A all right, you guys? Let's make this bigger so we can see this. All right, people, talk to us. Tell if you can hear everything okay. My voice is right in the yellow. Talk a little bit in your...
I also think it might help if I could raise this microphone a little bit further up so I'm not doing this.
Yeah, sure. You want help with that?
Yeah.
I gotta get up.
We might have to... Do we have to do it next week?
No, just take 1 second. I can't remember which way is which.
Thanks. That'll work too.
Stick.
All right. This might be a lot better. Who knows? We'll
find
try.
out. We'll find out.
All righty.
Thank you for your patience, everybody. Everybody get in the club, getting tipsy. Okay, let's go to main. Let's move the chat over here. D79 just threw us a little tip.
Hey,
Thanks.
thanks there.
That's Bud Light money, which is important because football season's coming up. Y'all. Kelly McCardle, get on up. Kelly McCardle and us. We haven't seen Kelly in here for a while. What's up, Budro? How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Don Shipley, I love this story too. I think you guys know I don't really hear, or I don't know the story ahead of time. I hear it when you guys hear it. And I did not anticipate what was happening or what would happen in several ways in this. Even though this whole battle was ongoing last week, I didn't see quite a lot of this coming.
What surprised you, babe?
I mean, I think especially that Morgan, who all this time has been sort of sensitive and everything to everyone, I'm quite surprised that they knew and didn't.
Good with the
Delilah,
day. Very nice.
Delilah absolutely is right. Why didn't they tell her? I was surprised about that. I will say I'm sort of surprised that Delilah had a make small kind of a spell on her, but also not that surprised. I definitely love how cool Billy was, though. That was super sweet. Like, you too?
You too.
I kind of love that part.
Billy's been my favorite arc of this. Dragon and Billy have been my two favorite things because Dragon's awesome because we all want a dog that turns into a dragon.
Can I have a little more noise?
Yeah, of course. We'll figure this out as we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Better? Okay, very good, very good. And Billy, we get to have so much fun with Billy's character next season, in season 3.
Oh, I'll be interested to see. This is another thing. Like I said, I don't know what the actual text of the story is. I never see the manuscript before Scott reads it to us on Wednesday evenings. And I also, even though I am there when they, during the summer writing retreat, when they are creating the outlines and the big set piece pacing that happens, I'm not there in the room with them. I'm just there in the house with them, and I'm kind of like the dorm mom. I do grocery shopping and taking care of whatever needs taken care of, and cooking and stuff like that. But I don't participate in their job of writing.
Right. Great. All right, so let's go over what we got coming here for you guys. All right, go back to main. First of all, basic housekeeping. We got to go through this stuff. We have, if you're not following us on the SMS, it's a fun way to get stuff. 855-955-5095. Text the word SIGTEXT, one word. You'll get a coupon for 10% off. We did have somebody who email us today convinced it's 15% off coupon. And I think they're mistaken. I'm trying to follow up with them. So I'm just giving you a heads up. Info at Empty Set. Remember, we have the Q&A episodes coming up August 21st and August 29th. So you're going to want to get those in and then sign up for the newsletter. I haven't got a newsletter out in a little while, but sign up for the newsletter too, because what the hell. Steve the Iceberg, Ricky Berg runs it. Yes, babe?
Back to the Q&A segments that are coming up.
I'm doing that right there.
Okay.
Yep.
You just mentioned them, that they were coming up.
Getting to that in a second. Discord, Steve the Iceberg, Ricky Berg's running the Discord. I know Discord can do all this super cool stuff that we haven't even scratched the surface of yet, but hopefully somewhere down the road we'll get to that. Because as I mentioned, we're doing far less in the world of Twitter. I'm more active. We'll run Threads now. Threads.net/Scott Sigler. And yeah, that's it. That's all we got. Schedule a stank coming up. Sunday, August 4th, Slay episode 71, Home Field Advantage, went live in your podcast feed. Tuesday, August 6th, Deep Cuts episode 10 went live in your feed. That is, after 15 years as a full-time pro writer, what would I have done? What would I do differently if I started over today?
Yeah.
A did a great job asking questions on that. I thought it was captivating and interesting.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty fun episode.
Yeah, but that is in your podcast feed, you guys. And if you know creatives and want to share that with them, hopefully what we have to say helps them out a little bit. Sunday, August 11th, tonight's episode goes live in the podcast feed. Wednesday, August 14th, the last episode of Slay Season 2, the final episode, episode 73. Make sure you are here for that. There's going to be some awesome stuff. And then hit them, baby. What's going on there?
So on Wednesday, August 21st, would normally be Slices, but we are busy that day. We have, we're going to see a concert that obviously is only the day that the concert is. So Slices will be on Thursday, August 22nd. That week. It won't be on Wednesday the 21st. It will be on Thursday the 22nd. And that will be our first Q&A episode. And I want to remind you guys sort of the rules surrounding a Q&A episode. You can ask any question you want. It doesn't have to be Slay related. We love those. I do have a handful of those already. Sean, thank you for sending yours in. You always have great questions.
Through,
yeah, and they're always great questions. But you can ask about any Sigler property. You can ask anything about Empty Set. Scott and I reserve the right to not necessarily answer for various reasons, but you're welcome to ask any question you like. So we normally have enough questions. We kind of already have enough questions for one episode. So if we get a handful this week and next week, we will definitely have enough for 2 episodes. So go ahead and send those to info@emptyset.
Great. Okay. And then let's see. Oh, we're going to talk about word count. So let's go to books, right? Yeah, that's everything. Oh, I'm sorry. And then on August 22nd, the Q&A is going to be the first half of the show. And then the second half will be a Deep Cuts where we talk about Alien Romulus, which we are seeing. We are seeing it in opening week. So if you guys want to participate in that particular chat, go see it right away at your theater. And if you don't want to be spoiled, you're just going to want to skip that. But we'll give you plenty of warning before that. So that's the thing we're going to start doing because A and I are trying to get to a movie a week now. A little date in action, you know, little romance stuff. Romance, Romulus. They go hand in hand, really.
Like this.
So if we go see first run movies, we're going to talk about and do an episode about storytelling and all the other stuff, things we like, didn't like. It's not at all the story smack we had before. It's going to be a much more free form, just kind of discussing what we thought of that thing. But speaking of stories, let's get into our word count. Right now, we have to go turn that off. And I go to books. Boom. There's us in the bottom right corner. And I don't know why I told you that. Slay, right now, 134,840 words.
Of the 108,000
It's supposed to be 108. I went through very specific math. This many words a week, this many episodes, 108. I guarantee it. I stand by it.
Yeah. How's that going?
I wish I had more time.
I wish you had more words.
And then Slay. So that's where Slay is. So I expect it's going to finish up. I think next week will wind up being a long episode. I've already written one segment that's over 1,000 words for one of Lincoln's 2 segments. It's sick. It's so good. I'm so happy to bring some of these characters back. And then, so probably about 140. And soon A will be getting ready to turn that over. And then the Crypt, ladies and gentlemen, is rolling along. The Crypt Book 2. We almost have a name for it. I've asked the advisors. I got to check with them. They didn't respond to that. I've asked the military advisors. I've asked Athon, our publishers. I've asked Nicholas Ansbury Smith. I've got 3 thematic groupings
Sure.
for the title so that books 2 through 5 will all kind of feel good, feel like the same story. But I'm trying to get all this advice from all these different people who know different segments of the market and know the content. So very soon I'll be able to announce the title of that, which would be nice. But we are at 85, almost 86,000, and I hope to be done by 110. But I'm in the vinegar strokes of the first draft, so I have no idea.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit
Jude's in the
about
house.
Jude is my brother. If you guys don't know, I think everybody knows that at this point. I hope you are having the best day you can have, Jude. I love you very much. We have sort of talked about what happens in the rest of this book of the Crypt, and I don't know how to write any book, including a Scott Sigler book, but it feels like not enough words are left to get through everything that Scott wants to say.
I'm looking at it, and I've actually put projections on each chapter. So this chapter should be 500 words. This chapter should be about 1,000 words. So it looks like it's going to add up.
Yeah,
but
like I said, I don't know how to write any book.
Here's this is what math is like for me with the books. It's the closest I can get.
Yeah.
But we are in the vinegar strokes, so hopefully it will be done very soon.
Okay. If you don't know what vinegar strokes are, I suggest you look up the web series The League.
The League. You just need to watch the one episode.
And you
it's
can
amazing.
Just look up The League Vinegar Strokes and watch it. If you find it funny, you should watch all of The League. It's hysterical. It's about a fantasy football league.
Sean suggests Crypt 2, Angles and Dangles. No. Tyler Miller says the Crypt Book 2, Into the Spanus. Also no. But 10 experience points. That's very, very good.
Somebody, Fuzzbubbles, I think you asked, do we know what's coming in the feed next? We are close to knowing, but we don't know exactly what's coming in this Scott Sigler Slices feed. We'll know next week, and you guys will know next week as well.
Yeah, so the next will be episode 73. Then it'll be Q&A 1, Q&A 2, and then we'll let you know what comes on after that.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. I think it's time to roll in deep cuts. What do you think?
All right, let me get the Mahoozy here. Is it time now?
No, we got to close out this show so people can leave. They don't want to listen to the deep cuts. We got about number 7.
All right, so we will be back with Slay episode 72.
73, my bad.
73 next Wednesday. But now it's time for deep cuts. We record these as bonus episodes, as you know. If you've got to tap out now, you can catch this week's conversation in the podcast feed. Subscribe at scottsigler.com/subscribe, which includes links for Spotify podcasts and Apple Podcasts.
Ready to set that timer, doll?
I am.
All right. Before you set the timer, hold on. Make sure I'm getting signal. Okay, say a few words, Beauty.
I'm saying a few words. How do we?
You're a beauty. I would treat you so good. Okay.
Also, Shorzy, if you've not watched that,
yeah, it looks like
definitely do that.
Looks like I'm still all over your mic for some strange reason.
Hopefully, we're not getting too much feedback from me, but we'll find out.
Okay, let me get. Let's do it. Ready. Fantasy and sci-fi? Why are they always grouped together? Are they the same thing? I'm so confused.
All right, calm down. We can discuss the differences between them and straighten that out right now. How does that sound?
That sounds good. Let's get at it.
All right, then do your intro.
Hey, y'all, welcome to Deep Cuts, the bonus episode of the Scott Sigler Slices Fiction Podcast, where a sci-fi author and an audiobook narrator discuss things and stuff in the world of writing and content creation. I am Scott Sigler, sci-fi horror author known far and wide as the future Dark Overlord.
And I am A.B. Sigler, audiobook narrator, and on this Deep Cuts, we talk about the differences between fantasy and science fiction, both in the marketplace and in Scott's work.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, do I have a line here? Oh, shit. God damn it. Of course, you'll cut that part out. A reminder that this is a bonus episode for the Scott Sigler Slices feed, not part of any particular tale. Listen if you like. We'd love to have you, but there's nothing in this episode you need to keep track of the stories.
So every once in a while we get questions, and over the course of Scott's career, we have had Scott himself say he's not really into writing fantasy, and then here we have Slay. So things evolve and people change, and that's part of the reason that why we're talking about this tonight. But the bigger thing is we often get people asking us why any given book of his is listed in sci-fi fantasy. And the biggest reason for that is the category. The category is not science fiction. or it is science fiction / fantasy. It isn't science fiction : fantasy. We can't change that. That is the metadata. That is how we do it. So we figured we'd talk about that.
Even the category is science fiction fantasy. Even the abbreviation in the publishing world is SF ampersand F. SF and F, they just go together.
They just go together, which is if you are a hardcore science fiction fan, it's confusing. If you are a hardcore fantasy fan, it's confusing. So we're going to talk a little bit about it and talk about Scott's evolution as a writer and Scott's our consumption of sci-fi and fantasy and what the difference is.
Great.
I'm going to start by reading. Scott reached out to his friend and fellow author, Jonathan Mayberry, and said, will you give us your take on what science fiction and fantasy is?
Let's a quick. Oh, there it is. Jonathan Mayberry is the author of more novels than you can possibly count. It actually exceeded the math of the world. His current one is called Necrotech. It is the Necrotech series, book 1. And he is a great friend of ours and has helped in my career a ton. And he writes a lot of sci-fi, a lot of horror, and now a bunch of fantasy as well. So we just wanted to give him a plug. And he's kind of a big deal.
He's definitely kind of a big deal.
Jonathan Mayberry's kind of a big deal. So we asked Jonathan what he thought about the difference between fantasy and sci-fi.
And I do want to say that Jonathan's first published fiction book was absolutely fantasy. It was weird because what I think today might be called urban fantasy, even though it was set in a very small town called Pine Deep, I think, but it is absolutely fantasy. So that's kind of interesting that he's sort of come full circle.
Yes.
So his definition that he sent to Scott is this: science fiction is, for the most part, based on what is and what's possible. The fiction is built on a scaffold of what is known, provable, and measurable. Fantasy does not require science and often explores the what if of situations where science can neither support nor explain what happens. Star Trek is science fiction. We understand spaceships, lasers, the theory of matter, teletransportation, theories of how Einsteinian relativity might be circumvented with quantum physics. Star Wars is fantasy because the Force is magic.
Very nice.
Yeah, and it's interesting because clearly there are robots and androids in Star Wars. And that is definitely science.
It's one of the biggest arguments in the world of nerddom, and it continues to this day. Is Star Wars science fiction or is Star Wars fantasy? And Jonathan's on the fantasy side of things, but like you say, spaceships, interplanetary travel, faster than light travel, which could be construed as magic, droids, robots, multicultural difficulties. It straddles the line for a lot of people.
And likewise, in Star Trek, which is ostensibly much more science-based, you have Spock, who can mind meld with you and all sorts of weird stuff that doesn't exist in our knowledge of the universe right now. Doesn't mean it isn't out there. It means we don't understand how it exists. Therefore, it doesn't really fall into the realm of science, but we call Star Trek science more than we call it fantasy. But I think
which is very interesting because most of Star Trek, the science in Star Trek is just a made-up bunch of bunk. Reconfigure the phaser array, do this to the teleporter room, all of these different things that they just make up every week in order to give you an encapsulated story. Star Trek is also very much in the fantasy camp too, I think.
Yeah. Before I start asking you questions, I just want to drop in very briefly that my take on the perfect melding of sci-fi and fantasy, Galaxy Quest.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
interesting.
I love it. If you haven't seen it, see it.
Great show.
It's great.
Great movie.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know what's happening with my neck.
I didn't hear anything, to tell you the truth. Correct.
So the first thing that we're going to talk about is what your personal distinction between sci-fi and fantasy is.
I think Jonathan covered it pretty well, but for me, it's having actual elements of science in it is the first floor of building a science fiction skyscraper. If the basic premise of your story is not sustainable by magic, completely ignores the rules of physics, then you are firmly ensconced in the world of fantasy. To be sci-fi, you at least have to be working with the basic fundamentals of what physics are, what is accurate, what is real, what is measurable.
And does that work for you as a consumer of entertainment and a creator of entertainment?
I have lightened up a lot as I've gotten older you guys listening at home, my wife is phenomenal and has helped me learn to appreciate a lot of different styles of entertainment that before I was not very good at appreciating. And now I'm much, much happier person in many areas of my life. So to answer your question, I enjoy both. I enjoy both a lot. It is a little harder for me to enjoy pure sci-fi because pure sci-fi must have a lot of rules in it. To be real sci-fi, you are following a bunch of rules, and they are rules that we can look up on Wikipedia. There's gravity. There is all of these different things that we can look up and know and understand, chemistry, biology, et cetera, et cetera. So writing sci-fi, I'll probably touch on this many times during this, writing sci-fi is much harder than writing fantasy. So if I'm watching something that presents itself as sci-fi and they don't have basic physics right, and they also don't have, well, here's the MacGuffin why physics don't work, which is how the crypt works. It's a huge MacGuffin going on there. Then that to me, it's harder to watch. I'm more critical of watching people who purport to be sci-fi than fantasy. Lost was a perfect example. Some people thought Lost was sci-fi. It was not sci-fi by any stretch. It was just pure made up fantasy. So that impacts it. So for fantasy, as a consumer, as long as the structure they create remains internally consistent, Brandon Sanderson would be the champion of that particular weight class, then I can enjoy it, but they got to stay within the rules they set for me to enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think for me, and I think I might be specifically talking about movies, but I can think of a handful of movies that are sci-fi and stay sci-fi right up until they need to pull the story all together, and then magic they pull out of a hat, out of the middle of nowhere. Sunshine is one of them. Elysium is one of them.
Yep.
And that, for me, not a lot of things. I am a much more laid back consumer of entertainment than Scott is. I think, as I've said before, because I don't create it, I don't have to have internally consistent rules ever. But that is one that I can't. It frustrates me to no end because it's always right at the end and you have spent all this time believing that they know what they're doing, and then right at the end they're like, shwa, shwa.
As a consumer, that is the thing that frustrates me the most and will make me walk away from writers, walk away from a property, walk away from directors. If they are presenting themselves in this fashion, this is sci-fi, bordering on hard sci-fi. They know exactly what's going on. And then you get to the end and none of the rules apply at all, and they just make up an ending. It makes me mad because I'm always rooting for story creators like myself who are going to put in the time to make real sci-fi. Like Ancestor. My novel Ancestor is absolutely science fiction. Everything that happens in Ancestor is real and scientifically grounded. It's just leveled up to a degree that allows me to tell a crazy story. But you read a story like Ancestor, then you get to the end and all of a sudden people are teleporting for no reason, for example. That lets me down as a consumer. I get frustrated. I'm like, I'm not going to follow this person's work. Time is precious. And if they're not going to put in the time to finish the story correctly, I'm not going to give them my time.
And while I have definitely sometimes gently sassed you about, he often says, like, if they just added one sentence here, it would make, and he would like to add one sentence every other sentence sometimes. And that's the gentle sassing. But it's true. In some ways, they could give you a little bit in the beginning to say, like, gosh, we haven't really seen what this is. I think Alien kind of does this in a very cagey way. They suggest that there's this unknown but very valuable exo asset. They should have given that crew more information.
Yeah, but fucking your characters over is not the same as fucking the audience over.
Agreed.
And Alien, absolutely hard sci-fi. They do everything right. And Alien gets a little loosey-goosey with a life cycle of the creature, but it's fairly consistent. Aliens is absolutely hard sci-fi. There's just a bunch of knowledge about the creature in it that we don't know, and the characters don't know, so we're all kind of in it together.
So let's talk a little bit about how sci-fi and fantasy are similar and beneficial to the consumer of that entertainment. In the chat room on Facebook, Pam Weber says that sci-fi and fantasy both have lore, and lore is essential to make that story sing. And I think that's true.
Yeah. Lore, I usually use the word rule set or rule structure, which is equivalent to lore. And that is a body of knowledge that the characters already have in place and that the writer needs to communicate to the reader or the viewer. In sci-fi, you don't have to communicate things like, this is how gravity works. We stick to the earth because of this. You can let all of that go. So a lot of the lore of science fiction is actual science that we either know or is easily searchable from multiple sources. The lore for fantasy, on the other hand, the creators and the writers have to establish all of that lore, which has been very challenging with Slay. I have to tell you all of the rule set, all of the backdrop. I have to lay the foundation to something that you can't look up anywhere because I made the whole thing up.
I'd say, as a consumer, I'd say that of fantasy, that is somewhat true for me. But I also think that if I approach a new world, a Piers Anthony world, a Scott Sigler world, a Pierce Brown world, and there is some element that is hand-wavy, I can accept that there's a hand-wavy MacGuffin. I don't need you to tell me how whatever happens for Lincoln's eye mask.
But that's for fantasy.
For fantasy, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
were you saying for sci-fi?
No, I'm saying for the onus of establishing the lore in fantasy is all on the writer. So I've told you Lincoln has this thing on his face. This thing will let him see in the dark, and he has a magic word to turn it off and a magic word to turn it off.
I see. But
That's it.
and I don't need to know what that is or how it works.
Because it's
me
magic.
Personally.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But
yeah.
you know, here's how the thing works, here's what it can do, and then you stop right there. I don't need to go into the granular level of magic about how this thing works. It's just, this is what it does.
How, as a person who spent the bulk of your career thus far writing far more in a hard science genre than a fantasy genre, how hard is that for you? Or how easy is that for you?
Switching to fantasy has been both liberating and challenging. Probably far more on the liberating side of things than on the challenging side of things. Because I get to make everything up as I go. I want a character to do this, the character does this thing, and that's it. I don't have to explain it. It's just magic. That's how things are in the city of Cordis. That's how Rixators work, etc., etc., etc. The problem is, for fantasy, is because consumers of my work are expecting a fair, honest, blue-collar story. I don't make shit up at the end of the story. You know, the example I always use is Stephen King's Needful Things. Fabulous book, great book, amazing characters, great writer. But you get to the end of that book and he just pulled some stuff out of his butt to finish the story and turn it in that isn't honest and doesn't mesh with the rest of the story. And it was left a very bad taste in my mouth. I don't do that to my readers. So now, excuse me, if I'm writing fantasy and I introduce all these things, I still have to track all of these things to make sure that what comes in chapter 72 doesn't erase something in chapter 3 unless I explain how it got erased.
And in Slay specifically, there is, I totally forget what it's called, the transportation gizmo that gets that Bingles has.
The transit, yeah.
The transit pole thing. Is it fair? Does it follow your rule set? If you've established that these transit poles exist, could it be a transit picnic bench? Or does it have to be pole-shaped?
Honestly, that's a good question. The reason that's a good question is because we're doing fantasy, I get to add and subtract from that all I want. Initially, one of the hallmarks of Slay was their equivalent of the Doctor Who transportation machine or their Stargate, for example, is public restrooms, is restrooms that are available to all kinds of people. Because, you know, people don't watch people going to the bathroom, and you don't wait around to watch someone come out of a bathroom. Somebody goes in the bathroom, you turn your eyes away from it. So it becomes this perfect anonymous way to go in, vanish, and go to some other place. But then if I want to introduce a park bench, I have the option of doing that. I can say, hey, here's this thing. For example, in Kellius Droman's mansion in season 2 of Slay, Kellius Droman is too highfalutin, too classy to have his transit hub be in a bathroom. His is its own special room that he is created. So I had to add that because I'm like, dude, this guy is not going to have a shitter that he can magically teleport anywhere. He's way too fancy for that.
Cannot wait to see what Vestinians looks like in that, if
Vestinian?
that's the case. Yeah, he's got to have one.
Vestinian is going to be awesome. Awesome.
We have to take a quick commercial break. We will be back right after these words from our fantastic sponsors.
Great job, babe. You're crushing this shit today. You're getting so good at this. You guys, my wife she's good at everything. Okay, so we're coming back, right?
3, 2.
Okay, ready? Go. Welcome back to Deep Cuts, the show with all the hot topics you can find out of sight of the food court.
We are chatting about the difference between sci-fi and fantasy in the marketplace and also for Scott as a creator. So we're going to take a question from YouTube right now. Tyler Miller asked, how do you come up with creatures or machines that feel real and unique to you?
I assume he's talking about in the world of fantasy. So it's easy for me to do things that feel real in science because I'm a very science-minded guy. I've been a biology buff my whole life. So I can take a thing like the ancestor we were talking about earlier and make that 100% believable to you easily. Fantasy, to me, it is a combination of a couple of things. Number one, most of the monsters draw from things that you already know. You know what a minotaur is. Mm-hmm. You know what a satyr is, right? You've seen these things hundreds of times in all the monster hunting stories and throughout history and throughout all the myths. So those are easy to draw from. You know what a vampire is. So I draw from that toolkit of stuff you already know in order to make a creature that instantly feels not only real to you, but my job is in 1 or 2 sentences to create a monster that you can instantly visualize in your head, and whatever you're visualizing matches with the rest of the story. That's really what it is. It's just like I do with real science creatures, is drawing from stuff that you already know without pointing it out to you with a neon sign and say, hey, you already know this. I just draw from certain cultural and scientific and mythological contexts, say, here's things you already know, and then the user runs with it. The reader runs with it.
And it's interesting because I have never met a centaur who liked tequila before, but it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter because you're right. You just accept all of that at face value, and your narrow or deep or wide or whatever knowledge of them, you just accept and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we have been talking about Slay as one of your first fantasy novels.
Sure.
Do you see The Crypt as science fiction or fantasy?
I see The Crypt very much as science fiction. And if I have pedant neckbeards in the room or listening to this, they're going to push back on that. And by all means, they're 100% correct. Because I take great liberties with certain rules of physics. But I consider it science fiction because some of the theories I work with in The Crypt, they're not mine. They're real theories. And I've been to science lectures and physics lectures where people talk about different planes of reality, different universes, not galaxies, different universes could have different rules of physics. Mm-hmm. And when I first heard that shit, I was like, come on, you guys are full of crap. But I have come to realize they are much better at math than I am. And I'm going to have to kind of trust the experts to say that this is a very possible thing. So it also straddles the fence. It is hard science. There's a lot of real physics, a lot of real weaponry, current weaponry that would work great in space. There is a great deal of attention paid to the fact that if you fire a cannon, a mass projector, at another ship in the crypt, there has to be a counterblast in order to balance the physics. Because if you fire a cannon from a ship, that ship is just going to spin ridiculously. So establishing real physics rules like that. At the same time, coming up with a structure, a system, a magic system, if you will, that means you can't kill another ship from 100,000 kilometers away. So where the crypt becomes a little bit of fantasy is 2 places. Number one, it is establishing a rule structure that means ships have to come in very close to give a physics reason why World War II style combat is happening in space. And that's a whole separate topic we can talk about sometime. But also getting into the hallucinations of the crew and moving into another dimension where things have a slightly different set of physics. And there's all these wild things happening to the crew that they can't understand and can't process because they have no framework by which to measure it. That is starting to delve off into the realm of fantasy.
Absolutely. Edward Rocco in the Facebook chat room asks, so are theories of science okay to use in science
Oh my gosh,
fiction?
Edward, 100%. Theories of science are absolutely a giant bedrock of science fiction. There's been a number of properties that have played with a thing called the Dyson sphere. A Dyson sphere is the concept that if you have a star, right, like our star, Sol, our sun, and you start to run out of space on your planet, why not build a shell or a framework around the star where the shell itself is about the same distance away from the star as Earth is? And then when you start to do the math on that, it's this massive surface area that you can possibly establish where every plate you put on that, every curved plane you put on that framework is going to enjoy temperatures very similar to what we have on Earth.
Right,
and
habitable.
Yes, habitable temperatures. Temperatures, number one. You got to have the right temperature to have life, period. Then you've got to have the right atmosphere to have life, period. But as humans, we're able to take our atmosphere and go put it in other places, right? What we can't do really is create a very specific range of temperature in other places. So that is, a Dyson sphere is a theory. Theoretically, it should be doable, but is anybody ever going to do it? Doubtful. To answer your question, Rocco, that is great episodes of Star Trek or Dyson spheres.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the Dyson sphere in science fiction is that it always addresses one piece of the puzzle. In this case, what you were talking about is a habitable temperature. Mm-hmm. And yes, you might be able to create artificial atmospheres, but what you cannot create, at least we have not been able to create in this universe, is more matter. So the amount of water that exists in our solar system probably isn't enough for a disk that is habitable at the distance from the sun all the way around the pathway that the Earth takes around the sun.
Right.
And that never gets mentioned. It's just, it's possible. We could do this.
Yeah. There are many theories that are possible. There are theories about faster than light travel. And I think most of those theories have been exhausted to the nth degree by various writers and creators. Like, hey, this guy says we might be able to go faster than light this way, and this lady says we go faster than light this way. That's all I need to know as a creator, dude.
For sure.
The Sigler rule is, if I'm going to use a theory and you go, man, Sigler's full of bullshit, this is crazy, but you Google it and you find like 28 Wikipedia pages on it, and then you go, maybe Sigler's not entirely full of bullshit. I got you. I got you at that point. Doesn't matter if the theory gets disproved. I own you and you enjoy my story.
I will also say I have found myself sometimes reading what is absolutely science. Nonfiction science for me is essentially, I don't want to say made up. I certainly don't mean to say that it is made up. I mean to say my brain's ability to understand and engage with information is so wildly limited that it feels like fiction. If not fantasy, it certainly feels like fiction. And the example I always use is I was about to say the last book that I read that Brian Greene, the astrophysicist, wrote. Mm-hmm. But I will say the only book that I attempted to read that Brian Greene wrote. He was talking about string theory and talking very much about it as this idea, what you're saying, like this is possible. People talk about it, people theorize about it. And as I was physically reading the page, and I read it as a physical book, as I was reading it, I was like, okay, I kind of get this, I sort of get this, I sort of feel like I understand. And then I'd turn the page and I'd keep reading and I'd be like, oh, well, and I'd turn the page back. Okay, kind of get this, kind of get this, kind of get this. Okay, kind of get this, kind of get this. Okay, still getting it, still getting it, still go. Okay, still got to go back to. I couldn't even keep it in my head from one page to the next. It had to, I could only, what was facing me, I could kind of barely understand. And I thought, not for me.
I can't remember where I saw it, so this is not mine, but this great analogy of what it's like for us as non-geniuses to process this information is a book by a person like Brian Greene. Means when you are reading the book, you absolutely understand his simplified version of what's going on. But the second you put the book down and try and tell another person what you just read, you realize you have no fucking idea. You can't process it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have in my life, this is a very quick story, I once went to Seoul, Korea for a vacation. And on the plane to Seoul, it was long enough ago that I read Jon Krakauer's Into the Wilderness, which is the story of Chris McCandless, who went into the Alaskan wilderness unequipped and met his demise. Spoiler alert, it's 20 years old. And I was so moved by this nonfiction book. I was so moved by it. And I get to my friend's house in Korea and she was like, how was your trip? How was everything? And I told her everything I could tell her about how wonderful and moving this story was and what a great storyteller Jon Krakauer was. And the next day we wake up, she's not jet lagged. I am jet lagged. Mm-hmm. And she's like, so, A, you showed up last night. You told me, this is a spoiler, you told me a story about a guy who ate a potato and died, and I have no idea if you were hallucinating. And it was a real story. It is a real story, but it was so outlandish to her that was the only thing she kept from it, and she just thought I was delirious from lack of sleep.
Gotcha. Okay. We got a question from Bruce Bach in the chat room, which says, what's the saying about a sufficiently advanced amount of science can seem like magic? Bruce, basically you said exactly right there. A's going to look it up right now, but you absolutely nailed it. This goes back to what we said about John Green. A second Bruce said, then like, oh, I know that phrase. And I'm like, I'm missing the words. Go ahead, baby.
It is an Arthur C. Clarke phrase, and it is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Correct. And that has been a hugely influential phrase on my work. It has allowed me to get over myself and thinking like, well, if I'm going to write about this stuff, I need to know this stuff. No, you don't, because we had another comment in the chat from Tyler Miller who says, some of your characters are so realistic, they make any of their surroundings feel real. Because a writer's job is to present characters that carry you through the story and you embrace their emotions and you feel what they feel. And that is how you enjoy everything. And honestly, fantasy, sci-fi, thrillers, all that matters is the trappings don't matter. What really matters is, do you believe what that character is going through? Do you feel like that character is a real person at a subliminal level? And then you go forward. So to answer Bruce's question, when your character is experiencing technology that is beyond our ability to comprehend, it's indiscernible from magic. It's no different. So Dyson Sphere is literal magic, right?
Mm-hmm. I will say I think it was Tyler's point in the YouTube chat room, for me personally, I have a very visceral response to that, which is, I won't give too many spoilers, but I'm assuming you guys know, in Pandemic, what happens at the end of Pandemic and the choices that Clarence has to make.
For those of you listening at home, if you haven't read my series, The Infected Trilogy, it is Infected, Contagious. The third and final book is Pandemic. That is what A is talking about, is the third and final book of that trilogy.
And the reason that what Clarence chooses to do and what Clarence feels justified doing at the end of that book works for me is because what he went through at the beginning of that book with Margot. What he goes through at the beginning of that book, which is all character driven, it is private, it is in a single room in their home together. That's why I believe that he truly is trying to save humanity, save the world, all those things by making the choice that he makes, which is a desperate, difficult, tragic choice. Mm-hmm. And it's all because of something that has absolutely nothing to do with the science of it. It has to do with the investment. It has to do with the investment in it.
There you go. Okay. All right. Quick, take a pause. We'll cut this out. Watch the dropping of the volume at the end.
Okay.
Like bring it back up, get that energy back up, because that's what we're working. Part of the testing. You guys get to see the testing we're working on. And people at home, they won't hear any of this. Let's rock.
Okay. As a reader, I think we kind of already asked that question. So how does the horror bent that you have to your work play into either science fiction or fantasy, or maybe both that you write?
The horror is fantasy. When you are starting to talk about supernatural creatures, ghosts, goblins, etc., that is absolutely fantasy. And you get a lot of leeway there. It's fantasy because I am making up the rule system as I go for horror. And the reader, it's a handshake agreement between the creator and the reader. The creator is like, here is the rule set. I'm going to give you 10% of the rule set. And then you're going to know 90% is unknowable. And I might give you another 10 or 20% as we go on. And the reader shakes the writer's hand and says, awesome, dude, let's take this ride. It's just a matter of getting you to believe, again, the characters are going through this. Horror is about making believable characters that you can relate to, going through a situation that they can't comprehend or understand or rationalize. Mm-hmm. And then you are side by side with them through their irrational explanation of what's going on and their disbelief about what is happening to them because they can't explain it. If a writer does it correctly, you're right with them, and you can't explain it, and you're with them side by side.
But you said at the beginning of that, you said you think that's more fantasy?
That's correct. Horror is absolutely fantasy because most horror is not about actual science. It's not about actual science.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. So
Okay.
I don't disagree with you that in general, I agree with that statement, but specifically going back to the end of pandemic, that was horrific.
That's a big, you know what? I'm very impressed. You've totally called me out. The end of pandemic deals with a situation that is actually absolutely rooted in science. And the end of Contagious, book 2, is 100%. This is real science. This is the thing that happens to people. It could happen to us at any point in time. And it is pure, unadulterated, apocalyptic horror. Mm-hmm. So yes, real science is absolutely horror itself.
I do agree with you, though, that horror is driven by the character. You have to believe, you have to suffer along with that character to be affected by that horror.
Yeah, that all goes back to, I as a creator, I'm going to introduce this thing that will cause damage to people. You as the reader have to accept, you have to sublimate what I have told you to the point where you don't question it or think about it at all. That is the real key to me. The key to horror is whatever lore I give you, you accept it without realizing you're accepting it. And it becomes the subliminal thing like this ghost, this goblin, this weapon, etc. This is a real thing. And it never crosses your mind again. You don't question what happens in the story because you've accepted that the MacGuffin is a real thing. If any horror writer who can do that is able to scare the living shit out of you, that's the job.
Agreed. So Joseph Adam Aldred in the Facebook chat room asks, then is it safe to say Interstellar is fantasy to some extent?
Interstellar is 100% absolute fantasy. I wanted to like Interstellar so much, but there are a few very cool things in Interstellar, and I will say absolutely, Interstellar's concepts of things that can happen in the real world of physics and science and extraterrestrial planets are beyond my ability to comprehend. No question. Whoever helped them knows more than I do. That being said, the giant ocean of ammonia and that stuff was awesome because that's real. What happens in the bedroom, that stuff, it's all absolute made up fantasy. They did it to tell a story. And it's great if you enjoy that story, but that is fantasy. And
I actually think you see that same thing in fantasy stories, like The Last Mimsy and things like that. You see that same device used to good effect. And I agree. This is one of those things earlier in this episode. I said my rules for storytelling and the blurring of the lines between sci-fi and fantasy are different than Scott's. And this is one of those situations. I won't say that I loved Interstellar, but I didn't not love it as much as Scott did not love it.
You asked me to come up with this diagram right here. Those of you at home, you may cut this out of the podcast, I'm not sure. Those of you at home, found the speculative fiction super duper Venn diagram with many things on it. And so, let's just cut this out of the podcast. Those of you at home, if you can see what we're seeing on the screen right now, this is someone's effort to try and land how all of these things overlap. Science fiction, science fantasy, fantasy, horror, magical realism, etc. You want to explain what we're seeing, babe?
Yeah, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this with you guys watching at home for part of the visual podcast is what's interesting about this is one of the things that Scott has always been is and identifies as is a hard science horror writer.
Correct.
So horror is in here, but hard science is not in here. And magical realism is in here. And I certainly consider that fantasy more than anything else. But it, in this diagram, overlaps between science, fantasy, and a little bit of paranormal dystopian. And I get that part. What I found so interesting about this is it's a little bit of everything, and it's non-descriptive to a fault.
The diagram we're looking at right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up, because it matters what the story is to how it fits in the world.
To me, the diagram you guys are looking at right now, this is the absolute magic of actually creating and telling stories, is there are no hard lines. It's impossible to define. Is Star Wars science fiction or fantasy? Is Star Trek science fiction or fantasy? These are arguments we have as nerds because there is no real answer. There is no measurement system by which we can collect enough data points to determine, no, that is fantasy. It's close science fiction, but it's still fantasy. There is no nomenclature to accurately define the things we're talking about, which is kind of what makes it fun. So this diagram of speculative fiction is great. Okay, are we back on stuff you're editing?
Yes. So I think that about wraps it up for Deep Cuts this week. Thank you all for joining us. Next week, we are going to be talking about, did we decide?
We are going to talk about the tools of the trade. And this is related to questions we've had from the chat room. How do I track things as a creator? How do I implement different things? So what we're going to talk about is the software and techniques that I use, track a story, track a series, track things over a long period of time, and the actual writing process itself, the things that I use to make the books that hopefully you guys all enjoy.
We thank you for joining us this week. We hope you join us next week.
And goodbye. You're all fantastic. Goodbye.
Thank you guys for hanging out with us.
Great job, babe.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Well, I can't figure this sound out to save my goddamn life.
I know.
It's so crazy. I think next week, you guys can't see this, but on A's right, there are 4 of my prized treasured bases, but they're all hard, flat surfaces.
You think that might be part of it?
I meant to do this week, but I forgot because I got the ADD. I got the ADD. Are you down with ADD? You know me. I think those might be part of the problem. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out because over here, I don't have the issue. It's not like you're talking. It's not like you're whispering.
I know. And that's why at the beginning I was like, we have done this. We have done this. We've never done that, but we have done all the other things that we talked about doing this time. Like I projected to the back of the room and I've tried to be very close to the mic and I've tried to be unidirectional. Yeah.
Yeah. The sound is very good. We've done it. Frankly, I'm not going to lie to you guys. A lot of people are telling me we've done an amazing job with the sound of this show, but tonight, after I hang up, A's going to sit down and go through and try and edit. She's going to go through all the deep cuts, edit the whole thing. And what we're trying to figure out is my voice somehow overpowers her microphone. So she has to literally go out and cut all the places I'm talking so that her voice stands out by itself.
Yeah, trying to figure out how we can make both of these microphones, which are the same microphone, work the same way. And Scott's done it so many times, I'm going to take a stab at it.
You guys are great. Jennifer Hathorn, we love you. Sorry you're going through some troubled times right now, but, get some sleep, man. Do the best you can. But we adore you. You're fantastic. You will absolutely get through this. Just relax and cut yourself some slack. The biggest thing you can do, cut yourself some fucking slack. This shit is hard, dog. This shit is fucking hard.
We still love hanging out with you 4 years in, 4.5 years in, whatever we are now. We hope you guys stay safe. And
Martin Evans says, bases are hard surfaces with tuned strings attached. He may not be wrong. He might be right.
Steve Rickyberg stole your line.
What did he say?
He said,
you all smell an awful lot like flowers. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go play some fucking Fortnite, and then A's got to do a bunch of fucking work.
To try and figure out
You guys are wonderful. We love you.
My mic doesn't work like his mic.
See you next week. Do not miss episode 73. It will tickle your privates. Good day.
See you next week.